Stugotz here. Is there something that interferes with your happiness or is preventing you from achieving your goals? If so, BetterHelp Online Counseling is there for you. BetterHelp offers licensed professional counselors who are specialized in issues such as depression, stress, anxiety, relationships, sleeping, trauma, anger, family conflicts, LGBT matters, grief, self-esteem, and more. Connect with your professional counselor in a safe and private online environment. And, of course, anything you share is confidential. You can now get help at your own time and at your own pace. You can schedule secure video or phone sessions, plus chat and text with your therapist. It's so convenient. And if you're not happy with your counselor, you can request a new one at any time at no additional charge. Best of all, it's a truly affordable option. Batard listeners, right now, you can get 10% off your first month with discount code STU. So why not get started today? Go to BetterHelp.com/Stu. That's BetterHelp.com/Stu. Simply fill out a questionnaire to help them assess your needs and get matched with a counselor you'll love. Start bettering yourself today. Head to BetterHelp.com/Stu. BetterHelp.com/Stu. The Dan Le Batard with Stugotz Show podcast is presented by Capital One. This is Banking Reimagined. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. Quoting home insurance just got easier with Progressive's Home Quote Explorer. Quote and buy all online at Progressive.com. Do it today. Sarah Spain, the commish, going to join us in just a second here on the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Here is your SportsCenter update. NBPA Executive Director Michelle Roberts said she's disappointed with the criticism NBA teams and players have gotten for receiving access to COVID-19 tests. She says that the federal government should be responsible for the scarcity of public tests. Josh Gordon intends to play in the 2020 season as he works his way back from his indefinite suspension. He's always working his way back from an indefinite suspension, Josh Gordon. And finally, when Disneyland closed last week, Friday, amid the coronavirus pandemic, it caused Jeff Rietz's streak of consecutive days visiting the theme park to stop at 2,995 days, a streak that's lasted more than 8 years. SportsCenter is brought to you by Advance Auto Parts. Think ahead, think advance. At any time, 1 in 4 batteries is about to fail. Get a free battery test and free installation with any automotive battery purchase only at Advance Auto Parts. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day.
Why, Billy? Explain to me why, please. I got skeptical Billy face in my face there moments ago. What were you objecting to?
How do you go to Disneyland 2,000 and whatever straight days? That's crazy. What do you do every day? You just show up to get lunch there? Like, why? What? I don't even shower every day for 2,000 straight days. I can't do the same thing every day for that amount of time.
Well, you could be afraid. I think you've got a consecutive streak of being afraid that lasts much longer than 2,000 days.
I've had random days of courage, Dan. I'll let you know.
I just sent you a text the other day, and you're funny about not returning any texts, but I just sent you a text the other day that I would like to start doing Guillermo's Fear of the Week. I'd like to figure out to create the imaging for just whatever your fear is that particular week. What do you have, Stugotz?
So much to choose from. I mean, how does he narrow it down to one?
What you feel right now is that Dan and Mike don't seem to be taking this social distancing very seriously. They're going to be giving everyone corona.
We've got a job to do. What I love is that ESPN has all sorts of worries about me going to the studio where we could do our show more normally. But here, I'm about to get Mike pregnant. He's touching so many of the buttons around here and is so close to me. And he just got done saying during the break, I wish I just had this already so it could go through my system and I could get on with my life.
I am totally with Mike on that, but maybe if you learned how to use the equipment by yourself, Mike could be in the safety of his own home. I mean, how about that? Think of others. I mean, let's go.
Yes. Thank you, Stugotz. I appreciate all your good work. Please, why don't you just leave this segment and go complain to your wife about me carrying your ass for 15 years?
Listen, that is totally fair. Listen, I praise you all the time. I do. I tell my wife I love you.
Oh, stop.
She was left to her own devices. There's a bathroom right here. You want that to be my penalty box? I'll go there. 2 minutes. I gotta go.
Chicken time.
I said I love Dan. You guys don't believe it?
Sarah Spain is with us. You can check out the interviews that she's doing, is what I meant to say. You could check out the interviews she's doing and the good work she's doing. That's What She Said podcast is where you go. And we're going to have Mike Ryan read to her some of these submissions in a second for hashtag Dan Action is what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to go because I look so much like a Bollywood action star that we discovered yesterday. Many of you are mocking me via the internet, so it's hashtag Dan Action. But before we do that, Sarah has been protecting her beloved Bears for a while now and has had to make emotional arguments on behalf of Mitch Trubisky. The Bears clearly trying to distance themselves from that. I imagine you were pretty excited about Teddy Bridgewater, less so about Nick Foles, or do I have that wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I think Teddy Bridgewater coming off of what he did with the Saints would have been pretty exciting, and I've always been a fan of Teddy Bridgewater, but I've been on the Foles train since before all the good stuff. I've argued that he is a guy who, if in the right system with the right coaches and set up for success, has incredible highs. Now, I understand that he's got some lows as well, and I'm trying not to be swayed by last year's, the injury and the resulting effort with the Jags was pretty bad. But I've been on the Foles train for a while, so I at least think you bring him in at the very worst. You make Mitch play so well that he beats him out, but I don't think that's going to happen. And instead, you have a better option while you've got your defense and a strong team around him. The offensive line is an issue that needs to be figured out because Foles is not nearly as mobile as Trubisky when Trubisky's healthy. But I'm excited about it. Also, at this point, my team has made me so pathetic and sad that I'm kind of like Stugotz, where you just get excited about trying and taking a swing because you're going to either suck and take a swing or suck and accept mediocrity. And we've kind of just been doing that. So why not? Why not give it a shot? Why not be hopeful about it?
Yeah, it's one of the great things in free agency and sports and football that the mediocrity that you haven't seen can provide a hope that is larger than the mediocrity that you have seen. So how is it that you feel about Trubisky, though? You want to be done with him, right? If Foles can't beat him out, that's not going to make you any kind of happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, unless for whatever reason Trubisky excels and figures out, I think part of the problem last year was that coming right out of the gate, Matt Nagy threw a bunch at him, presuming that he had taken steps forward, and instead it became clear that he couldn't read defenses, that he needed to have everything dumbed down for him. Now, is that who he is forever? Probably. But, we've also seen some quarterbacks that really needed to take time within their system and within the professional ranks to figure things out. Maybe he comes out and is significantly better, but I still think Foles is a better option based on what we saw from Foles at his highest highs with the Eagles. And when he was, with a lot of these people, he has a connection to essentially everybody on this Bears offensive staff, and that's where he thrives the most. And so, listen, I don't really care which one it is. If one of them is just doing awesome to the point where they clearly beat out the other one, great. That's what I want. I don't have any issues with Trubisky. I've, like you said, probably emotionally defended him in ways that were, statistically unproven. But I'm fine if he wins out.
Well, I'm curious, though, have you looked at any metrics or anything that offers you encouragement? Because I don't believe in Foles. I understand that there is a Foles train in Philadelphia because he won the Super Bowl, and obviously he was great for them. But I also thought that was a totally overwhelming Philadelphia Eagles team. And what Foles has looked like everywhere else he's been is what I usually expect Foles to look like. And I haven't looked the numbers. I haven't crunched anything here. But I don't view Foles as appreciably better than Mitch Trubisky. I just think that he played for a team that offensive line was overwhelming. They would have scored on anybody that year. They dusted the Patriots in the Super Bowl because they were sitting there fooling around, throwing passes to Foles. That Eagles team, I feel like there are 30 quarterbacks in the league that could have won the Super Bowl with that Eagles team, and the reason I feel that is because I saw one of them do it.
Yeah, I think also he had a great season in 2013 with the Eagles, which was not that dominant, crazy team. He had 27 touchdowns and 2 picks. He, led the team to the playoffs. And again, you can look at what was around him and why did he have such success then that wasn't able to be carried over when he went to St. Louis. He struggled there, 7 touchdowns, 10 picks. Is it the system? Is it the weapons around him? Is it a strong offensive line? At one point he was considering retiring. So, we love to have guys in the NFL that didn't want to be there anymore. But I think I have not sat down and looked at what the difference was for him in the early years with the Eagles when he came in for Vic, and then when he took over in 2013. And what through lines you can find between that and the success he had again later with the Eagles. But it is clear that if he's in the wrong position, he's a total dud. And so the question is, when he gets to the Bears, does he have the things around him that he needs to replicate what happened in Philly?
We'll get to movie titles with Dan in just a second, and Sarah will judge them and grade them. But Sarah, I'm wondering, because you're a lot like me, you sitting around doing nothing for 24 hours a day seems like a personal hell. Like, it really does for a lot of people, obviously. What is Sarah doing to fill the time? Because you need to move around. You're much like me. You just need to move and go.
Right. I actually have not had that much time to fill because I have my radio show every night. That's 4.5 hours. And then I've been doing some like around the home tapings for Around the Horn at home. I have some stories I'm working on for ESPNW. So somehow I'm the only person who is still remarkably busy during a time when everybody's talking about how they're filling their time and being bored. I do workouts with my favorite yoga/Pilates teacher virtually via Zoom with classes that she's been holding. So my day is not all that different because I already also did my show from home. So at this point, I guess see the dogs a little more often because I don't leave the house to go work out.
At Batard Show is where you check in on the polls, and hashtag Dan Action is where you guys need to go. Again, if you haven't been listening the last couple of days, there's a Bollywood action star who looks remarkably like me. There's a movie poster that is jarring, and we have asked the internet to come up with some names for the movie that I would star in as an action star. Mike Ryan has a list of those names. We're going to go through them rat-a-tat-tat here, Sarah, and at the end we're going to ask you to pick a clubhouse leader so far as we try to get to the end of the week and find the best one. Let's get started here, Mike.
Before we get to the best of the best, we have a couple of new submissions at hashtag Dan Action. So far, here are some good new ones. The Matrix. Soy Story. Parmageddon. The Hunt for Red Lobster. Bad News Bear Claws. Planet of the Crepes. Jurassic Pork. Stocky Balboa. I like this one. The Predator. And here, this one's a little easy. Just Grease. All right, so here's some of the best at hashtag Dan Action.
That Crepes one, man.
Staken. The Fugitive.
The Fugitive is so good.
Burritos Way. Flan in 60 Seconds. Mission Empanada. John Thick. Pie Hard. Top Gut. XXXL. 300 pounds. Robocarb. Snack Panther. Tequila Mockingbird. The Fattiator. The Italian Sub.
The Italian Sub. Like, you are making it rain nicknames here. So if you had to pick from among those, Sarah, it sounded like we were tickling you. If you had to pick from among those, who's your clubhouse leader so far?
By the way, one of those is definitely the name of an actual porn. So I think we should stay away from that one. Okay, so my favorites were Parmageddon, Pie Hard, Robocarb, and Snack Panther. I think if I'm going for one of those, this is too hard. I'm gonna go Pie Hard.
Oh wow, Pie Hard is what upset. She's going. All right, a bit of an upset.
Yeah.
All right, that's
I just want to see the movie poster with you.
Okay,
within the tank top and
very good. Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate all your help in that regard. You enjoyed that a little too much. Thank you for being on with us. That's What She Said is the name of her podcast. She's doing good work over there. You should check it out. Thank you, Sarah.
See you guys.
Apocalypse Cow.
I saw your faces there. I thought Sarah chose poorly. You guys all seem to have thought that all of you thought that Sarah chose poorly there. We will get into a deconstruction of that in a sec.
If you missed any of our interviews, check them out on demand in the Dan Le Batard Show podcast, brought to you by Capital One. With Capital One, you could open a new checking or savings account with no fees or minimums. Welcome to Banking Reimagined. Capital One. What's in your wallet? Approval required. Capital One N.A. Member FDIC. Dan, it is time for Straight Talk. It is brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless.
Speaking of our interviews, we love 90s baseball around here more than we love baseball this century. And the latest South Beach session is with Tom Glavine. He told some amazing stories. We're going to give you a snippet of that in the next segment. Before we do that, however, I want to go to something that Chris felt very badly yesterday for Scott Hanson, the NFL red zone man who seems like an impossibly kind human being. But there was great pity that Chris had for Scott Hanson. What happened there, Chris?
The king of the red zone channel. And so basically a couple nights ago he tweeted, and I don't really think of him as a reporter, but he got out there with a report about the Brady stuff. He tweeted, "Sources tell me Tom Brady, Derek Jeter, Bill Gates, and Tampa Bay Lightning owner Jeff Finnick had dinner Sunday night at Burns Steakhouse in Tampa," which I believe Mike says is like the best steakhouse ever. He continued, "Brady and Jeter, who live in Tampa, are friends for years. Gates and Finnick developing real estate and infrastructure in Tampa." So you're like, wow, okay, Scott Hanson reporting it. And then he started to backpedal. A couple hours after that, he tweeted, "Two sources have denied that Brady was at Burns Steakhouse Sunday night. My original source stands by his story. I have reached out to someone else who was there waiting for confirmation." So at this point, I'm like, Scott Hanson stepped in it. And then yesterday, he just had to come out and he tweeted, "The Tampa dinner I tweeted about yesterday apparently did not happen. My source, a person who was a friend of mine for years and claims he was an eyewitness, swore it to me that it was true. Apparently it can't be trusted. I am so sorry for those who trusted in me and for this story." What's this friend doing? What is this friend doing? I love that he wrote a friend who was a friend of mine. So I would love to be a fly on a wall for that conversation between those two.
Billy is sitting here laughing uproariously. He loves the misery of others. Like, if you're going to go down in shame, reporting about a dinner at a steakhouse is about the worst possible story you could break. It doesn't even mean anything. But Billy, why are you laughing at poor Scott Hanson, who's an impossibly kind man and is now draped in shame that he feels great remorse over, and it's evidently cost him a friendship?
Yeah, that's what I don't understand. So, he's no longer friends with this person because he maybe saw someone that looked like Adam Gase and Tom Brady? I don't get that.
Adam Gase?
By the way, saying a steak dinner means nothing. Get out of here. It means
okay.
Everything.
All right.
Where deals are made, Dan.
I don't know why you're reporting that Adam Gase was at that dinner. I don't know why
he was on the phone with me.
Anything. Excellent work, as always, Billy. Always appreciate your efforts there. We will be going to the Music Dome at some point later in the show. Colin Cowherd is taking a victory lap because he reported first that Tom Brady to Tampa. And you know what's funny about this? You're going to find this funny, Stugotz, because this happens to me occasionally because I've ceased being a reporter too. Mm-hmm. Just like Colin Cowherd reported, I got a text. I did receive a text from a mutual friend of ours. You're going to know who it is as soon as I give you this story. I received a text from somebody who used to work in the Tampa Bay organization. And he said, hey, I've got something for you here, but I assume because he's had so many damn jobs and now works in Las Vegas that he was saying that he had something with the Raiders. And so I didn't even answer the text because it
would have been great if you reported Brady to the Raiders.
I know, right? It would have been great if I'd reported the wrong team because he's had only a dozen jobs.
Let's go easy on giving Colin Cowherd so much credit for being the first to report Tom Brady to Tampa, because he was also the first to report Tom Brady to Indianapolis, Tom Brady to the Chargers, Tom Brady to the Jets. That guy has been putting out all the takes.
I'm going to read this to you before we get to Tom Glavine here, because this is from Funhouse here, an account that makes fun of Mike Francesa. These are all Colin Cowherd tweets. The Indianapolis Colts make a lot of sense for Tom Brady in 2020. Colin Cowherd explains why. Put Tom Brady in that Cowboys uniform. We get shocked all the time in sports. This looks like it would work. Tom Brady's heart is not set on leaving the New England Patriots. Colin Cowherd explains. Derek Jeter did it the right way. John Elway's Super Bowl MVP exits did it the right way. Now is the perfect time for Tom Brady to retire. The Tennessee Titans could solve Tom Brady's problems. Colin Cowherd explains why. The Los Angeles Chargers have the best weapons for Tom Brady if he leaves New England. Colin Cowherd explains. Tom Glavine next.
That is Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Everything for less, only at Walmart. ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Insurance. All guests on the Dan Le Batard Show appear via the Shell Pennzoil Performance Line. Here's your SportsCenter update. NBPA Executive Director Michelle Roberts says she's disappointed with the criticism NBA teams and players have gotten for receiving access to COVID-19 tests. She says that the federal government should be responsible for the scarcity of public tests. Josh Gordon intends to play in the 2020 season as he works his way back from an indefinite suspension. And finally, a population of parrots is called a pandemonium. Here's the SelectQuote difference. Most companies give you one option, one policy, one rate, but SelectQuote shops and could get you up to 10 options from highly rated life insurance companies. For a free personalized quote, call 800-780-1010 or go to SelectQuote.com today. For all the latest headlines and information, tune in to SportsCenter on ESPN Radio all throughout the day. There are a few things this show loves more than 90s baseball. It gets us all excited. Hall of Famer Tom Glavine is the most recent guest on South Beat Sessions, Dan's own podcast. And here is a snippet of that conversation with Dan and Hall of Famer Tom Glavine.
Tom, let's start here. You came up through hockey, and didn't you choose baseball specifically because you controlled the whole game? You held it in your hand?
That was part of it. I mean, I always loved hockey more so than baseball. I think the reason was because when you play hockey, you step on the ice, you're in the middle of the action. In baseball, that's not always the case. I mean, I loved playing center field. I loved playing first base. But, there's periods of inactivity, so you can get a little bit bored. Being on the mound, that wasn't the case. When you're on the mound, it's similar to playing hockey. You're in the middle of the action every single pitch all the time. Everything kind of revolves around you. You're controlling the tempo of the game, all that stuff. And I don't think that aspect of it interested me. It was every pitch, every play I'm in the middle of, and this is fun. So I liked it from that standpoint, and I think that was part of the reason why I gravitated towards pitching. But when I ultimately got drafted by the Braves as a pitcher, it was a little bit of a mental adjustment to think that, okay, I'm only going to pitch now. I'm not going to be able to hit and play the outfield anymore.
Do you have any other places in your life where you want control? Most human beings crave it, even if it's the illusion of control. Sabathia is pretty eloquent on the idea of nothing starts until I say so. There's a power in that.
I like to think I have that control, but I think my wife would probably have something to say about that. But I will say that my style of pitching was probably very much mirrors my life. I'm very controlled in what I do. I'm very thought and process oriented. I like things organized. I don't necessarily like flying by the seat of my pants all the time. I like it once in a while because it's a change. But I'm more of a structured guy. I like to know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it. But I would be lying to you if I said everything starts and ends with me. My wife has a lot more say in that than I care to admit sometimes.
What's the item on your resume? What's the one that you would point to? That is the one that gives me the best feeling of personal satisfaction.
I think aside, obviously, from the wins, I think the number of starts in the innings pitched. That spoke to my longevity, my ability to take the ball every 5 days. And I think that's something that I took great pride in and I'm extremely proud of, and it's not like, oh, I was lucky I never was injured or I never had anything going on. I had things going on a lot. But, I always felt like if I can take the ball, I'm going to take the ball. And if 80% of me is better than 100% of the guy I'm getting ready to face. So there were a lot of times where looking back, maybe I should have spent some time on the DL or things of that nature. But I just felt like that there was any way I could take the ball every 5 days, I was going to do it. And like I said, I think the amount of starts and the amount of innings pitched, once it was all said and done, I think speaks to that longevity, and that's something I'm proud of.
So you're a lefty. If I say to you, who would you rather face? You got to pick one of these. Barry Bonds as a lefty or Gary Sheffield?
Neither one of those guys, really, if they're on their game. I mean, I was always... Of all the guys that I faced, and, everybody always asks you, who are you most afraid of? I wasn't afraid of anybody. I mean, you respect guys, and obviously guys at certain stages or during the season or whatever, if they're hot or they're cold, whatever, present different challenges. But I think the one guy I always said that scared me in terms of hitting a line drive back at me was Gary Sheffield. There was something different about how the ball came off his bat when he hit it, and it was a different sound to it. And I was always fearful that if he hit one back at me, I wasn't going to have time to get out of the way. So that was always something that was on my mind with him. Now, facing those two guys, who would I rather face? I'd probably rather face Gary, simply because, as everybody knows, lefty on lefty, my changeup wasn't as big a weapon for me as it was against righties. I mean, my changeup was my money pitch. So I felt like I had more options against righties than I did lefties, just because that changeup was neutralized a little bit more. So I probably would side with Gary, but certainly not as a disrespect to one guy's talent level over the other.
What pitching staff throughout history do you look at and say that staff was better than our staff?
That's a good question. Obviously the one that we get compared to so often was the Orioles staff. And, those guys obviously were great. And I watched a lot of those guys when I was a kid. I'm sure there are others. I mean, there have been discussion in today's game, and, the Mets staff always comes up. You look around at today's game and you take a staff like the Mets and yeah, I mean, every one of those guys has better stuff than I did. Every one of them has better stuff than Greg did. Arguably, John had the kind of stuff that a lot of those guys have, but then it gets down to the pitching side of it. And, stuff is one thing, but being able to go out there and utilize your stuff and actually, translate that into wins is a different story. And I think that's something that clearly that Mets staff has had trouble doing over the years. I mean, every year you look at the Mets and you look at those guys and you think, okay, there's a team that's going to have to be reckoned with, and then somewhere along the line, guys get hurt, and it kind of falls apart. But it's hard, really, to look at too many staffs that have had the longevity and the success that we had. I mean, certainly you could look at Oakland, too, for a short period of time when they had Zito, Hudson, and Mulder. But I guess where we separate ourselves from a lot of great staffs over the year was our ability to be able to do it for a long period of time together, which for a number of reasons just doesn't happen very often. We were fortunate that it did.
When it comes to Greg Maddux, how would you explain to the layman, in terms that we can understand, how accurate he was?
It's hard to explain. I mean, if you delve into his numbers and you see his strikeout to walk ratio, you see, a number of years in there where how few guys he walked. You look over the course of the career and how few guys he actually went to 3 balls on. I mean, it's really remarkable when you start to dive into his numbers. But I can just tell you, having been his teammate, I think the most remarkable thing about him during the time that I played with him was his consistency. I speak from my own experience. You go out there and you pitch enough games during the course of the year, you're going to have 5 or 6 stinkers where it just doesn't go your way. You give up some runs, you get taken out of the game early, and it's just not your night. I don't want to say I never saw Greg do that, but it was very seldom, particularly that run where he won his Cy Youngs in consecutive years. If he went out there and went 7 innings and gave up 2 runs, it was a bad game. And it was just remarkable to watch how consistent he was in that regard, night in and night out. And then when you watch him pitch, I mean, it really was a lesson in artistry. I mean, he threw the ball where he wanted to. Each pitch set up the next pitch. His misses were just really good misses where, very seldom did he miss over the plate. His misses were always out of the strike zone, where if he did miss, our hitter couldn't do much with it. So, it's the kind of thing that if you were to turn on the TV and watch him, you would not be enamored by anything that he did, other than at the end of the game, you'd go, oh my God, he just threw a 2-hit shutout. That to me was just fun to watch.
Can you tell one of the mythological stories about him and his genius? You guys, when you were on with us together, Smoltz and Glavine and Maddux, you said that the story's not exactly true, that 2 pitches before a screaming foul ball was hit into your dugout. Greg Maddux said the way that this is setting up here, there's going to be a screaming foul ball into the dugout. What's a story that you could tell to sort of explain that he was a little bit ahead of even the greatest of the great?
I remember we were playing Montreal, and Vlad Guerrero was coming up. and there was a situation where he had an open base, and Bobby went out to talk to Greg about what he wanted to do. And I think Bobby kind of had his mind made up that, he wanted to walk Vlad and move on to the next guy. And Greg had a conversation with him, and he said, Bobby, no, here's what I'm going to do, and he's going to pop up to third base. And I'll be damned if he didn't pop up to third base. So, now some of those stories, I don't know how many of them are true because, look, there are a lot of Greg stories out there, and there were a lot of times where we would goad Greg into saying something that was a little bit far-fetched just to see if the media would run with it, and I'll be damned if a lot of times they didn't run with it, and then we would just kind of laugh about it after knowing that he just made something up. But that was the respect he had, rightly so, as a very smart tactician out there on the mound. And in my career, obviously you go through phases, but, the first few years of my career were up and down. I was trying to find myself and do some things, and ultimately found my change up and got comfortable with that and took off in 1991. And really, I didn't think a whole lot about what I was doing those 91, 92, 93 before we got Greg. I just kind of went about my game plan, and I didn't really pay attention to what hitters were doing or how they were reacting to certain pitches. And, it really wasn't until we got Greg and I started sitting down on the bench with him and watching games and talking about pitching and stuff like that where, he was the first guy that I really talked to that talked about a hitter's reaction to your pitch and how that dictates, what you can do on the next pitch or what he's looking for and things of that nature. So that's how he thought. If he threw a pitch and he saw a reaction from a hitter, it went a long way towards dictating what his next pitch was. And, to me, he was the best at doing that and certainly hugely helpful for me in my career and starting to implement that in my game plan.
All of that said, though, he was also profoundly disgusting.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, people ask about, tell me some Maddox stories, and it's like I can't. They're it's the kind of stuff you can't say in public, but he was fun to be around.
Well, he was feces obsessed.
Yeah, no question about it. I'll just leave it at that.
That's it. It's got to stay in the clubhouse. I already know. I've got some of it, but I'm not going to lead you there. You absolutely won't do it.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you one. I'll talk out of school one time. I remember spring training. We were about 2 days from coming back to Atlanta, and Greg went to the bathroom and used one of Walt Weiss's T-shirts to clean himself. Saw him do it, put Walt's T-shirt back in his locker. And about 3 days later, we're back in Atlanta. And he comes in, and he's kind of rummaging around his locker. He's got this look on his face. And I'm like, Walt, what's wrong? And I knew what was wrong. He said, something smells in my locker. There's something not right. And I'm like, oh, geez, I don't know what it could be, whatever. So he starts going T-shirt by T-shirt and finds the T-shirt that Greg had used. And, without skipping a beat, it was Maddox. So he was looking for Greg and was ready to kill him. So those are the kinds of things Greg liked to do.
It sounds like you were a bit of an enabler. It sounds like you were right there with your teammate.
It was like you just said. I wasn't going to talk out of school. I was being a good teammate. I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus.
Tom, always appreciate your time and appreciate your general way of being. Thank you for spending some time with us.
My pleasure. Happy to do it.
The best movie experiences of my life, and I suspect if this quarantine ends up lasting a lot longer, we're going to end up becoming a movie show. We're going to be doing a whole lot of movie reviews, but it's when I don't expect anything. It's The Matrix. I don't like science fiction. I didn't like Keanu Reeves at the time. Then I watched The Matrix, and I'm amazed. Rotten Tomatoes gave a 98 or something to Knives Out the other day, increased my expectations. My God, was it bad. Like, I expected something from that movie, and then I did not get what I was expecting from that movie. But Mike Ryan just immersed himself in some Creed 2. He won't shut up about Creed 2.
It's the only way I can get my sports through the magic of cinema right now. And this was a fight I hadn't seen. I love the original Creed, and I finally got around to watching Creed 2. And Stugotz, this is incredible because Apollo Creed's son fights Ivan Drago's son. That's a whole movie. And if you don't want spoilers, I would say tune away now. But the fight scenes are incredible. And Creed gets dominated in the first fight against Drago's son. But Creed gets dominated in the first fight at the Barclays Center, and you realize, this can't be the culmination of this film. This is happening 40 minutes into the film. But the way that it ends is Drago strikes Creed after the bell, resulting in a disqualification. It's eerie because you know how Apollo Creed died at the hands of Ivan Drago in a similar fashion. Creed gets hospitalized, and he decides to have a rematch against Ivan Drago, but it has to be in Moscow, and as you know, you can't trust the judges because now this is home court for Ivan Drago's son. So Rocky Balboa's like, we gotta knock him out, and that's the whole strategy. It's an incredible fight. Apollo Creed is fighting with broken ribs. Adonis Creed, I'm sorry. Phew, big mistake, major fine. He's fighting with broken ribs, and the big culmination is after this crazy comeback in which he's already been knocked down 5 times, very irresponsible from the Russian referee. But Creed punches out Ivan Drago's son, and Drago has to go up to the ring and throw in the towel for his son after Brigitte Nielsen gets up and goes away because she's abandoned the family because it's a huge embarrassment to the family. So it's incredible. And you remember how Rocky didn't throw in the towel to save Apollo's life. He could have, but he didn't. So, poetic justice. You simply cannot write things like this unless you have.
And they did. The disease detective joins us next.